Hello and welcome to RedCompass After Hours, where the best and brightest of the financial services industry let their hair down, unbutton their collars, and share their passion for payments. I'm Mike Truter, Director of Digital Ecosystems and Innovation at RedCompass, and in each episode, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Julie Guetta. Let's kick things off. Today, we not only have a special guest, but in support of International Women's Day, we've selected the topic of gender and financial inclusion as a special focus for our After Hours discussion. We're very honored and excited to welcome Elisa Minischetti. Elisa is currently based in Singapore as Vice President in the Digital Transformation Division of MUFG Bank, where she supports MUFG fintech investees to reach scale across Southeast Asia. Prior to this, she has lived in Myanmar to promote the uptake of digital financial services, was involved in initiatives to increase the use of mobile money services amongst women in Africa and Asia, and has worked in Tanzania, helping rural Tanzanian and Burundian women to become contributing members of a successful fair trade enterprise. Okay, let's get down to business. As usual, the format is simple. We keep the spice and spontaneity as we have not prepared a script, and we'll simply see where the conversation takes us. There's only one rule. Like the Scottish knife, the skiandu, we need to keep things short, sharp, and to the point. Elisa, wow, what an amazing career, and such a strong focus on financial inclusion for women. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led you to focus on empowering women through financial services?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me here with you today. It's my pleasure. Yeah, sure. So during my first and second year of my master's degree, I had to pay for my visa to go to the US. But as you said, I was doing my internship in this social enterprise that was aimed at empowering women through Articraft. And as I was there was no way for me to go to Dar es Salaam, where the American embassy was based. So as I was complaining in the village about this issue that I was having, I was approached by a gentleman who told me that actually I didn't have to travel all the way to Dar es Salaam, which was located several kilometers, thousands of kilometers compared to where I was. But I could simply send the money via mobile phone. And this was like mind-blowing for me. And it was not a scam. You know what you're thinking, it was not a scam at all. So I ended up giving him the money, which was $250, which, as you can imagine, was quite substantial for someone living in a rural area of Tanzania. And through his mobile phone, through the technology then I discovered to be mobile money, I was able to pay for my visa and then get my visa and go to the US to travel. And after I graduated from my master's in the US, this sort of use of the mobile phone, the use of technology, to empower people who otherwise would be completely financially excluded, sort of stuck with me. And I pursued a career in financial inclusion, specifically via mobile money. Again, mobile money is a tool that has been used by mobile network operators. The pioneer was M-Pesa in Kenya, I think back in the early 2000s, and ever since has been growing and has been like the primary way in which people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are able to be financially included. And therefore, I was able to get my first job at the GSMA, where I was focusing on this full time, unpacking specifically the differences in uptake and usage of mobile money between men and women. So this is my little personal story that led me to pursue a career in financial inclusion.
Just for those of us who don't know, GSMA is a company an organization that does what?
Sure, it's the Global Association of Mobile Network Operators, and they have a fund, a development fund that looks at ways in which the mobile phone as a tool can be used to sort of empower people in developing countries. Again, the mobile phone is probably the most ubiquitous piece of technology, the most affordable also piece of technology that people in developing countries are likely to have. And again, it is basically like the gateway to a series of life-enhancing services like mobile money and mobile internet. And as you can imagine, mobile ownership is really the first necessary step for someone to be able to access this life-enhancing services like mobile money.
I think Julie and I have had this conversation in the past before, but like looking at what traditional rails in, I guess, the developed world, right, where there's a central bank with very established schemes that allow kind of retail payments to cross them, but that's certainly not universal, right? And so typically the places where we see mobile money is those countries where they don't have a well-established financial ecosystem or financial market infrastructure, right? So mobile phones are kind of stepping in and providing that alternative payment rail for people to transact effectively.
Yeah, that's right. And in the beginning, in the early days of M-Pesa in Kenya, mobile money, the provision of M-Pesa by Safaricom was not seen immediately as a revenue generating business. In fact, it started losing money since the outset for at least the first 5 years. It was seen a bit more as a way to increase the stickiness of,
right.
of customers, right? Of existing Safaricom customers. But after sort of the first 5 years in which it was losing money, it quickly became widespread because it was clearly addressing certain barriers that people were experiencing in these countries. When it comes to Kenya, for instance, there was this inherent lack of safety when it comes to like sending money. If you don't have a bank account, the only way for you, person my age, around 30 years of age, living in Nairobi, in a big metropolis, trying to make ends meet and trying to send money to your family, for instance, located in a rural area. If you don't have a bank account, then the only way without mobile money that you do that is you give money to someone who then boards a bus, and then you have to pray that this person delivers the money and all of it to the intended recipient. So again, there's the risk of theft of having money in your pocket rather than in your mobile phone or in your bank account. I think were sort of main drivers that led people to start using M-Pesa. And the service was so successful that a lot of countries, a lot of mobile network operators across sub-Saharan Africa tried to replicate it. In many cases unsuccessfully, because they followed a copy-paste approach rather than copy and contextualize approach, if you want.
I seem to remember, Julie, I can't remember the numbers. Was it more than 60 countries there are more than 60 mobile money kind of implementations around the world, right? In third world, but we don't see them at all in Europe, right?
No, I think for me, the point that you made around basically Safaricom and M-Pesa not being profitable at first is interesting. Because for me, there is a point around the reach in general. And if you think of it's interesting depending on the segment how people look at it. Because if I think of, for example, Facebook, the early days, was it profitable? No. Yet it was basically the value of the company was very high because of the reach and the number of customers it had. So I feel that could be the same for Safaricom. Yes, not maybe yet profitable and so on, but because of the reach, then potentially you can, I would say, start to think of different type of products. So think of, the concept of cross-selling, upselling, or start touching different, I don't know, sort of industry, thinking of, I don't know, for example, insurance and this type of thing. But I feel very interesting the fact that on one end, when we look at Facebook, it's a company where we said, okay, they're not profitable, but value billion. And on the other end, when it's the same concept applied to a different part of the world, the company does not have the same value.
Yeah, it's very true. And as a matter of fact, with mobile money was initially sending and receiving money. And the way that that Safaricom was generating value, like monetary value out of this, was transactions, a cut of the transactions. Which obviously, if the transactions are very low value, the percentage cut is going to be also very low. But yeah, it's fantastic how they stuck to it, and then they started adding services to it, like you mentioned, through partnerships by providing loans, which required, obviously, from a regulation standpoint in Kenya, a partnership with a bank. But they also started offering insurance. They started offering savings products on the wallet, as they were seeing that people naturally started to store money on the wallet, not saving it, just storing.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And of course, something that is oftentimes overlooked in such a development is that you need to have a strong network of replacement of ATMs, right? Because if you think at a bank, the cost, I remember there was a study from the World Bank that was estimating the cost for a bank to set up an ATM around $400,000 US. So the cost of setting and maintaining the ATM, which obviously, even like think about bringing electricity in areas where there is no electricity, right? Because effectively what is M-Pesa, for instance, or mobile money targeting is people who live in rural areas, right? Who don't even have a bank nearby, let alone an ATM. So whereas the cost of setting up a mobile money agent, which is meant to be the walking ATM, if you want, is only $400 US. There was a study by the World Bank that I think estimated this. I think SIGAP. And obviously you can see that it makes much more sense for a mobile network operator to provide a walking ATM, which is the mobile money agent, compared to a bank offering like opening a branch or opening an ATM in a rural area. So it's I think the power and the need for agents that help customers to perform cash in and cash out onto their wallet is oftentimes neglected, if you want, whereas they are like an integral part of what constitutes mobile money and what makes it successful. And also the fact that if we go back to sort of the gender aspect of this, how in certain countries, the gender of the agent was a main sort of discriminant that sort of decided whether a woman was to open to open a mobile money account or to make transactions, because there is this correlation, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, of certain countries more than others. I guess it's important not to generalize about this, but how there is a tendency among female customers to be more at ease with female agents. So this is one of the nuances that sort of it's important to highlight when we talk about gender and mobile money as well. We tend to think as customers as a sort of monolithic, homogeneous sort of segment, whereas as you mentioned earlier, it's very important to sort of, even look at the basics, right? The gender segmentation of your customer base, the gender segmentation of your prospective customers, where do they live? What is their like basic income? Are they educated? Are they not educated? Because by looking at this, you sort of uncover a lot of interesting sort of insights that can lead you to increase the uptake of mobile money among your current and prospective customer base, as well as the usage. Because as we said, if mobile money operators make money out of the transactions that occur every day, on each account, you really want to reach as many people as possible. And you want them to not be just regular users, not just use it once a week, not use it once a day, but multiple times a week, multiple times a day. Yeah, no,
absolutely. And I think for me, like, the point you made about data is quite critical, right? Because today it's really rare that we get like, it's improving a lot, but it's still rare that you get actually like gender segregated data. And actually often when you look at gender segregated data, then you see, for example, that women are better borrower effectively than men. Again, in general, I'm sure there is exception to this, like, but the point is, like, by looking and disaggregating, like, the data as such, I think we could increase, like you mentioned, the adoption and trying to really think of ways for, unfortunately, women that are still excluded from, you know, the financial services way of like different incentive to bring them on the ride. Because at the end of the day, this is a profitable segment. You know, like again, you need one, you want to bring volume. Two, you probably want to like basically cross sell. If you want to cross sell, as you mentioned earlier, that's probably a credit. So you want like, you know, to loan to someone who is a good borrower so that you can see your money back and have your interest being paid, right?
Absolutely. And whether you like it or not, women are like 50% of the population. If you want a little more than that. So, you know, just by not, as you say, like gender disaggregating at a minimum, right? Your data, existing customer, prospective customers, I think you just lose out on a massive opportunity.
I think like for me, another question that I have is, so in general, we have like 1.7 billion unbanked people, right? It's interesting to see that out of the 1.7, 1.1 billion individuals are actually women. So we discussed like, you know, probably like segregated a bit more like, you know, the data as a way. Do you see like any other way to basically like kind of close this gap? Because the other interesting thing is like since I think it's 2011, the gender gap on this data did not move effectively. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think you're quoting the fintechs, right? The sort of a survey that gets done every 3 years by the World Bank is, I think, is the Bible when it comes to financial inclusion. Yeah. So for sure, I guess that mobile money goes a long way to sort of tap into this massive opportunity that is represented by, as you say, 1.1 billion women being unbanked. And this is, you know, the reason for this is, again, because with a mobile phone, you can actually open not a bank account, so you can open a wallet, right? That allows you to do certain, you know, certain transactions that very much resemble, you know, what you could do if you had a bank account. So we don't call them unbanked. Those who have a mobile money, we don't call them banked because obviously don't have, you know, a bank account, but they are financially included, right? Because they do have a way to store their money. They do have a way to make transactions digitally, right? And not in an analog way. I think when it comes to mobile money, I think the global fintechs says that women are, so the gender differences are quite big. Women are 33% less likely than men to own a mobile money account, which is like a slightly reduction from the previous survey that was done in 2014. But again, sort of these numbers mask very, very big differences at a regional as well as at the country level. And if you sort of look at this data, you unpack this data a little bit, you see that sub-Saharan Africa, of course, is like the cradle of mobile money, if you want. And as a result, sort of the gender gap is around 20% between men and women owning a mobile money account, whereas in Southeast Asia is around 75%. So it's much higher. In terms of, you know, what drives this gender gap, it's there's not one thing, right? If there was only one challenge,
that would be easy.
Probably one solution, right? Like one silver bullet that targets that, and that's easy. But obviously different countries have different regulations, they have different people, different cultures, different challenges. So if we look at, you know, what is holding women back from owning, for instance, a mobile money account. One of them that was observed, for instance, in Chad, was the lack of access to identity documents. And again, this you can tell that to open a mobile money account, apparently in Chad, you need to provide a proof of identity. And women, more often than men, they don't have one, and they basically don't exist. So this is a barrier that, to be tackled, requires like intervention at the regulation level, right? there's not much you can do other than that. Then there was a research that I did while I was at the GSMA in Mali and Ivory Coast that sort of looked at, what was preventing women from registering for a mobile money account to become an active user of a mobile money account. Because again, there are sort of certain stages that you have to go through. Opening a bank account doesn't make you banked, right? If you do
absolutely
all of the transactions, using cash, it really doesn't, it means that you have a bank account. But again, there are certain differences that I observed in Mali and Ivory Coast, and they were preventing women from moving from the registration phase all the way to becoming like an active, a power user. I defined it of mobile money, and those were the fact that they were not really fully understanding what the service was about. They didn't think they needed it because, whether you like it or not, there is this sort of patriarchal system that sees women a bit more relegated to in the house. So what is perceived as their task is not as much as, sending money or like managing the finances. Very much that is still sort of pertains sort of more archaic gender roles. And then something else that, was preventing women from, becoming power users of mobile money was the fact that they were very low in digital skills and literacy. So they were really like struggling from a technological standpoint on understanding how it would work. Sometimes it was real, sometimes it was just perceived. We tend to be a bit modest and, thinking that we can't do things. And so that was something that was holding women in Mali and Ivory Coast back. And then there's the sort of the age-old problem, which is lack of trust, right? Maybe they had tried something similar before, it didn't work out. And so their trust was gone. And also, if we think about, people who tend to live around the poverty line of $2.5 per day, even if you lose like 10 cents is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. So then also what I said earlier about mobile money agents, right? In Rwanda, it was shown that, women tended to prefer same-sex agents to interact with. They were more comfortable with that. And so there is really like a positive correlation between the percentage of female agents that are employed by mobile network operators and the proportion of the female customers that this mobile network operator that has. So again, it's if you unpack the reasons why sort of women tend to be left behind when it comes to mobile money usage, it's not just one reason. Is many reasons that obviously have their roots in what is their cultural, what's the cultural condition of a given country, of a given region, as well as the regulatory, if you want.
So
I was as well. Oh, sorry.
I was wondering, so if we manage to kind of solve the problem, obviously there's lots of initiatives to try and correct the balance and improve the balance, and what are the benefits that come from having kind of equality in men and women being able to kind of use money equally?
Yeah, so for starters, if we look at sort of the commercial impact that this would have for mobile network operators who offer mobile money services, this would be substantial, right? As we said in the beginning, women represent really 50% of the addressable market in every market. Like there's no way around it. So if you don't look at your data and you don't do something specific to address some of the barriers that women face from accessing your service and then using it regularly, using it powerfully, then really you're missing out on like 50% of your addressable market, which is, I want to say, like too big to ignore. So yeah, when I was at the GSMA, there was always this balance that we tried to strike in the minds of, because we were advocating, right? So you have to advocate to regulators, you have to advocate mainly to MNOs, mobile network operators. And there's always this social impact that goes hand in hand with commercial sustainability. You really don't want to do charity. So if you offer a service that is life enhancing, that is life changing, then you might want to charge for that, because oftentimes people, if you offer them something for free, they don't even take it like seriously enough. So in terms of sort of commercial impact on the side of mobile network operators, I would like to say that, again, if you don't address women, you miss out on 50% of your addressable market. On the side of women, of course, having access to a technology like mobile money just empowers you. And we have, myself, I was in Mali, I was in Ivory Coast, I was in East Africa as well, and there were always sort of these heartwarming stories about how women, had the transformational effect that mobile money had in their lives. So it empowers them because it makes them feel capable, if you want, and also allows them to sort of reclaim the power that they have to manage the resources. Maybe gives them a kick to start off an entrepreneurship venture. So yeah, there are many benefits stemming from granting equal access to mobile money services to both men and women.
So I think, and even if you take this kind of one step further as well, often having an account and or even a mobile money account, right? That's the way for being paid. So that's the way to be in a position where you can actually offer goods or services and be paid. So kind of enter the workforce. And it's interesting to see that, some of the McKinsey figures, which obviously are not specific on mobile money, but just looking at this in general, and they said that by bringing more women to the workforce in general, women could contribute to 12 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. So, and at the end of the day, when you think of it, it starts by initiative like this, right?
Yes, for sure.
That's an amazing number. I'd love to talk all day about this, but I think we're pressing on for time. Elisa, thank you for enlightening us on such an important topic. Really, I'm amazed, what's been shared today, and it's really something that probably is not discussed enough. Especially when you consider financial inclusion touches on no less than 8 of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is significant. So a focus on gender equality and financial inclusion has a big impact on improving our global society. And I think too often the developed world assumes financial services that we enjoy are universal, but the reality is they're not, and especially so for women. So a key ingredient for solving gender inequality requires ensuring gender equality in financial services as well. Thank you also to our audience. We really appreciate your support. And if you have enjoyed this discussion, then please show your support by giving us a thumbs up, hitting subscribe, and clicking on the bell to get notified when future new content arrives. Also, don't be shy about giving us feedback. We really appreciate your comments and suggestions for new topics and guests. That's all for this week. Catch you on the flip side. Thank you. And Elisa, I'll see you in April.
Yes, see you. Okay. Hope you're not going to jump the line. You're not. You can't jump the line. You can't be before. You can't get the.
No. I'll stand in the queue. I'll be like a good Singaporean.